2 Maccabees, chapter 8. But Judas, also called Maccabees, and those with him, secretly infiltrated the villages and summoned their kinsmen. They called together those who had continued in the Jewish religion and took them as companions. So they gathered about 6,000 men. They invoked the Lord to look upon the people, who were trampled underfoot by all, to have compassion on the temple, which had been profaned by ungodly men, to have mercy on the city, which was being destroyed and was about to be leveled to the ground, and to hearken to the blood that cried out to him. They also invoked him to remember the lawless destruction of the sinless babies and the blasphemies committed against his name, and to show his hatred of evil. As soon as Maccabeus had his army in order, he was not to be withstood by the Gentiles, for the wrath of the Lord had turned to mercy. He came without notice to towns and villages and set them on fire. At opportune times he regained places and put to flight not a few of the enemy. He found the night the best time for such hostilities, so talk of his manliness spread everywhere. When Philip realized that Judas was making progress little by little, and that he was advancing with more frequent efficiency, he wrote to Ptolemy, the governor of Coele-Syria and Phoenicia, for aid to the king's government. And Ptolemy quickly appointed Nicanor, the son of Patroclus, the foremost of his friends. He sent him in command of no fewer than 20,000 Gentiles of all nations, to get rid of all the people of Judea. He sent Gorgias with him, a general and a man experienced in the affairs of war. Nicanor determined to make up for the king the taxes due to the Romans, 2,000 talents, from the capture of the Jews. He immediately sent word to the cities by the sea, inviting them to buy Jewish slaves and promising to hand over 90 slaves for a talent, not expecting that the judgment of the Almighty was about to fall upon him. Now word came to Judas concerning Nicanor's impending attack, and when he told those with him about the arrival of the army, those who were cowardly and distrustful of God's justice ran off and removed themselves from that place. Others sold all their remaining property, and at the same time entreated the Lord to rescue those sold by the ungodly Nicanor before he even met them. They entreated him not for their own sake, but for the sake of the covenants made with their fathers, and because they were called by his holy and magnificent name. But Maccabeus gathered those around him, 6,000 in number, and exhorted them neither to be panic-stricken by the enemy, nor to fear the great multitude of Gentiles who were unjustly coming against them, but to contend bravely. He also exhorted them to keep before their eyes the lawless outrage committed against the holy place by the Gentiles, and the torture of the mocked city, and still more the dissolution of their ancestral way of life. For they trust in arms and bold acts, he said, but we trust in Almighty God, who with only one nod is able to overthrow both those who come against us and the entire world. He also spoke to them of the times help came to their forefathers, how the 185,000 perished under Sennacherib, and how in the time when the battle took place in Babylonia against the Galatians, 8,000 in all entered the fray, along with 4,000 Macedonians. But when the Macedonians were perplexed, the 8,000 destroyed the 120,000 because of the help that came to them from heaven. Then they took many spoils. With these words he gave them good courage and prepared them to die on behalf of their laws and their homeland. Then he divided his forces into 4 parts. He appointed his brothers, Simon and Joseph and Jonathan, each to command a division, putting 1,500 soldiers under each. In addition, he appointed a leaser to read aloud from the holy book and gave the watchword, "The help of God." Then he led the first division himself and joined battle with Nicanor. When the Almighty became their ally, they slew more than 9,000 of the enemy, and wounded and crippled most of Nicanor's army, and forced them all to flee. They seized the money of those who came to buy them as slaves. After they pursued them for some distance, they were compelled to return because of the hour, for they did not continue their pursuit because it was the day before the Sabbath. So when they had collected their arms and stripped the spoils from their enemy, they kept the Sabbath, greatly blessing and giving thanks to the Lord, who had brought them safely through the day, and appointed it for them as a beginning of mercy. Then, after the Sabbath, they gave a portion of the spoils to those who were tortured, and to the widows and orphans, and distributed the rest among themselves and their children. When they had done this, they made a common supplication and besought the merciful Lord to be reconciled at last with his servants. Moreover, of the forces on the side of Timothy and Maccabees, who contended against them, they killed more than 20,000 of them, and became the masters of exceedingly high fortresses. They divided a great many spoils, giving shares equal to their own to those who had been tortured, and to the orphans and widows, and also to the aged. After they collected the enemy's weapons, they organized them all carefully in convenient places, and carried the rest of the spoils to Jerusalem. They killed the commander of Timothy's forces, a most unholy man, and one who had greatly troubled the Jews. While they were celebrating the victory in the city of their fathers, they burned those who had set fire to the temple gates, Callisthenes and some others who had fled into one small house. So they received a recompense worthy of their impiety. The thrice sinful Nicanor had brought the 1,000 merchants for the purchase of the Jews, but he was humbled with the help of the Lord by the opponents he regarded as one of the least account. Thus, after he succeeded primarily in the destruction of his own army, he took off his glorious military apparel and made his way inland alone, like a fugitive, until he reached Antioch. There, he who had undertaken to establish taxes for the Romans by the capture of the people of Jerusalem proclaimed that the Jews had a defender, and therefore were invulnerable, because they followed the laws appointed beforehand by him.